Opera sponsors mystery drama.
And now with all the updates and headlines this Friday, it's the ITV News at 10.
Amid the historical splendour of Westminster Hall, the King leads his siblings and the nation in paying respects to his mother. Dressed in full military uniform, they took their watch alongside the Queen's coffin as she lay in state. As they stood guard, people from all walks of life continued to stream past as royalty and ordinary Britons came together for a shared moment of reverence and respect.
I could hardly look up and look at them because I wanted to control my tears.
To pay my own homage to the Queen, but also to the family that was there, my new king as well, was just spectacular.
Waiting times to see the coffin have now hit 24 hours, with temperatures plummeting overnight, but they still come. Also in News at 10 tonight. The Met Police prepares for the biggest security operation the capital has ever seen. Abroad, and Ukraine says it may have uncovered more evidence of Russian war crimes after discovering 400 graves in the liberated city of Izium.
It's a sad day, but it's a day for us to remember, you know, the incredible legacy that she's left.
This is ITV News at 10 with Rageh Omaar.
Good evening. In the 8 days since Her Majesty the Queen's death was announced, there's been so much to take in. The huge outpouring of respect, memories of her unprecedented reign, state ceremonies and public celebrations of her life and of her service. But this evening, in the last few hours, in fact, there was a simple and poignant moment where the late Queen's 4 children stood vigil by her side. King Charles led his siblings, their heads bowed and dressed in full military regalia, as they stood silently, whilst beside them, people from all walks of life passed through the cavernous medieval Westminster Hall, the new king leading the people in a shared moment of grief.
However great the office, however fine the robes, the pain of loss has no respect for position. And yet, despite that pain, there must be respect. Respect for those who carried such office before. The striking of the stick on the stone floor heralded a change in the guard. And so, as king, Charles III led the honours to the Queen. As her son, he led the honours to his mother. On his face, an indication of which of those roles bears the greatest weight now. In the uniform of the Royal Navy, he stood at the head of the coffin. At the foot, allowed only for this sole vigil, the Duke of York, in the uniform of a Vice Admiral of the Royal Navy. Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, spent the last hours of her mother's life with her. She is the first woman to be part of the vigil of the princes. What a proud yet heartbreaking place in history she now holds. The Duke of Wessex, the youngest of the royal siblings, stood guard to the left of his mother. From above, his wife, the Countess of Wessex, the Queen Consort, and other family members watched on. There is great theatre to royal death, but for all the colour and the pageantry, this is, at heart, a family gathered in grief. For a little over 10 minutes, the family stood guard until the double tap from the officer of the watch signalled the end of their vigil. For those who had queued night and day, this was a moment of history they could not have imagined being part of. In silence, they watched on in respect and contemplation. For these moments, they were in the presence of two majesties.
The royal family were there, and it was really amazing to see how, and sympathized with them. You feel for them. You reflect on what had happened to you as well, and then you can put yourself in their position to see how they're feeling. And I could hardly look up and look at them because I wanted to control my tears.
The feeling was undescribable. I haven't stood in a queue for so long and have a perfect moment to pay my own homage to the Queen, but also to the family that was there. My new king as well was just spectacular.
A day that ended with ceremony in London began with ceremony in Wales. For 53 years, Charles was Prince of this nation, noted in history as the longest-serving Prince of Wales. Today, he returned as king. The Army, Navy and Royal Air Force marking the arrival of King Charles III to Welsh land. Along the streets of his new kingdom, flags of the Union and flags of the nation were raised in welcome for the king and his queen consort. In this country that he's held in such affection throughout his life, hundreds turned out to return that sentiment. But whilst there was celebration of the king, this was a moment to mark the passing of a queen. The Queen's wedding ring was made of Welsh gold, and she said it was a reminder of Wales wherever she went. Today, Wales remembered her in prayer and affection.
Dear friends, we have come together this morning to give thanks to God for the life of Queen Elizabeth II. Here in Wales, we join with the whole United Kingdom, the Commonwealth, and with people across the world to grieve her passing. We remember her service and dedication. This was truly a life of grace and wisdom.
This was a day of ceremony, but it was also a day for subjects of the realm to meet their king and queen. For some, the detail of protocol was lost in the excitement of the moment. For others, it was a chance to look forward as well as back. "You'll be a wonderful king," this well-wisher told the new monarch. And then it was from church to state for the official motion of condolence from the Welsh Government. In the Senedd building, opened by the Queen in 2006.
Today, there is a sense of transition in Wales. This morning we came together in a service of reflection at Llandaff Cathedral to look back over a reign unrivalled in its length and its reach.
From the King, a thank you in English, and the Welsh he learned studying in Wales.
Llywydd, Prif Weinidog, aelodau o'r Senedd. Diolch o galon I chi am eich geriau caredig. I am deeply grateful for the addresses of condolence which so movingly paid tribute to our late sovereign, my beloved mother, the Queen.
And it was to that beloved mother the Prince returned, to do his duty as king and son, to honour a monarch and a mother in her final days of majesty. Emma Murphy, News at 10.
And as ever over the last 8 days, I'm joined by our royal correspondent, Chris Shipp, who's just across the road from Westminster Hall. Chris, I guess your thoughts on the extraordinary moments today?
Well, Rageh, look, as I stand here tonight, this incredible queue just keeps on coming. You can see it a little bit in the bottom of the screen there, like a constant flow of people both into and out of Westminster Hall. But there was that moment this evening when on top of the Victoria Tower here, the Union flag was lowered and the King's standard was raised, which was the indication that inside that great hall, the King was mourning with all these members of the public who had come here to see and file past the Queen's coffin. It was yet another moment in a week of significant moments, and there is more to come this weekend when the Queen's 8 grandchildren will hold their own vigil, including Princes William and Harry, one at the head of the coffin, the other at the foot, and Prince Harry, at the request of the King, we are told, will wear his military uniform, which is a significant development for him.
And I understand, Chris, I mean, before the vigil this evening, that one of the King's many engagements was with faith leaders at Buckingham Palace, something close to his heart. And we've got an indication of how he might see his role there.
Absolutely. After starting the day in Highgrove, going to Cardiff, and before he came here, the Prince was at Buckingham Palace, where he met a number of faith leaders, and he answered the question about what kind of king he will be when it comes to faith. Remember, he is defender of the faith because he is the supreme governor of the Church of England. But he said this evening he has an additional duty. He said it was less formal, but he will still diligently discharge it. And that, he said, was to protect the diversity of the country and all the faiths within it. So a really clear indication from the King that he wants to reign on behalf of all Britons from whatever background they come.
Chris at Abingdon Green, thank you so much. Now, the very fact that organisers of the Queen's lying in state had to put a pause on people joining the queue today indicates the overwhelming public desire to be a part of this momentous occasion. Tonight, the main queue is moving again, but mourners wishing to pay their respects are joining it all the time. And with the same message, they're prepared to wait as long as it takes. At points today, there were warnings that that could be a full 24 hours. Those who have got to the front and filed past the Queen's coffin have been telling us of the solemn hush and deep emotion inside Westminster Hall.
Everybody's so quiet and calm. The beauty of the stillness is very impressive. And I just said a prayer for her and goodbye, really, which is, I suppose, all you can say now.
Those that dedicated hours to say goodbye to a dedicated monarch were rewarded with a special moment.
When you actually get there, the real, I suppose it's the reality. Because you keep seeing these wonderful pictures of her on television and things, and you sort of can't quite believe she's gone. When you're in there, you really know it. It's so still and silent and so beautiful.
Pin drop silence. You could just feel her there.
Rashmi was born in Kenya, where in 1952 a princess became our queen.
I actually felt her presence the minute I walked in. I really felt her there, and I'm going to miss her. I never met her, I've just seen her on TV, but I will miss her, I really will.
For those here to pay their respects to their former commander-in-chief, it's a struggle to contain the emotion.
The boss is no longer with us, and yes, I needed to pay my last respects. So. Going into the hall, the quietness, the solemnness is just piercing, if that's the right word. I needed to get in there and I needed to have that moment, so that as soon as I walked in them doors, that was me. I was in a place of my own. Very emotional here. Hard to hold back, to be honest.
Eleanor travelled here from East Sussex with her mother.
It was inspirational and magic.
7-year-old Alonye, to the bottom right of the screen, waited 14 hours overnight to experience this.
It felt like the Queen was in spirit, and it felt nice and wonderful.
Each wave of people brings a tide of emotion, collective catharsis for a community in grief. Rebecca Barry, News at 10, Westminster.
Tonight's vigil by the late Queen's children reminded us of the few days that remain for all of us to have the chance to say farewell. Chloe Keedy is at the far end of the queue of people waiting their turn. Chloe, how long a wait have they got in front of them?
Well, look, I can't think of many things that people would be willing to queue through the night in the cold for. The current estimate is at least 22 hours. So people joining the queue right now are doing so in the knowledge they may well still be in it tomorrow night. But most people I've spoken to are just happy to be in the queue at all. It was at about 10 o'clock this morning that the queue was paused because this corner of Southwark Park that we're in, just south of the River Thames, was quite simply at capacity. It was too full. It is open again now. There's been a steady stream of people coming in all night, but the accessible queue, which was also paused earlier, still hasn't reopened and now isn't expected to until midday tomorrow. And so it seems not everybody got that message, because tonight there are hundreds of people, many of them in wheelchairs, many of them elderly, queuing outside in the cold. Here in Southwark Park, they've said they're going to hand out blankets to try and keep people warm, and most people I've spoken to have said they are determined to stick it out however long it takes. They say they want to do this for the Queen, but the advice, if you are planning on coming down here tonight, is wrap up warm, bring lots of food and water, and be prepared for a very long wait.
Well, despite the long wait, people behind you very, very keen, as we can see. Thank you, Chloe. The lying in state at Westminster Hall has not, however, been without a note of diplomatic controversy. The official delegation from China is expected to be barred from filing past the Queen's coffin, though not, of course, from attending the funeral itself. It's because the Chinese government officials have been banned from Westminster, while 7 MPs and peers remain sanctioned by Beijing.
It is expected that foreign dignitaries attending the Queen's funeral will also be able to pay their respects at her lying in state, except, that is, for the Chinese delegation. The Speaker of the House of Commons is reported to have banned them. The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman said she hadn't seen the report, but the attendance of foreign delegations invited by the British, she said, shows their respect to the late Queen and the UK. As host, the UK should follow diplomatic protocols and proper manners to receive guests. Politicians here have been speaking out against China's treaty whims. He's here last year. Members of the Lords and Chinese officials have been banned from Westminster. Lord Alton says they shouldn't even come to the funeral.
Her Majesty the Queen, of course, was head of state, so this is an assault on parliamentary freedoms and the right to express our opinions. So having the Chinese Communist Party, who have been accused by the Prime Minister herself of committing genocide in Xinjiang inside Westminster Abbey, seems an extraordinary decision to have taken.
Official Chinese visits have long been controversial, although President Xi himself had a full state visit in 2015.
I am confident that it will serve to highlight the sincerity and warmth of our friendship.
And despite last year's sanctions, the Foreign Office has apparently advised the palace that a delegation should be invited to the funeral. The guest list for the Queen's funeral at Westminster Abbey is a matter for Buckingham Palace. The convention is that invitations go out to all nations with which the UK has diplomatic relations. Across the road in the Palace of Westminster, however, access is a matter for the Speakers of the House of Lords and the House of Commons. And they, it appears, have decided that Chinese officials are not welcome so long as China sanctions MPs and Lords for speaking out against Beijing. Carl Dinnan, News at 10, Westminster.
We saw the warm reception given to King Charles in Wales earlier today. The bond between the royal family and Wales is deep and long-standing, but it's also a complex relationship. Queen Elizabeth's visit to the people of Aberfan after the horrific disaster there was deeply appreciated, but there was controversy surrounding Charles's investiture as Prince of Wales. And even today, when he returned for the first time as king, there were voices of dissent.
No longer Prince of Wales, now King. Charles came today to the ancient cathedral in Llandaff to an enthusiastic Welsh crowd.
Later on, when they grow up, we can explain and tell them and show them, you know, everything that happened when they were younger.
I lost my father about a couple of months ago, so I can't imagine, you know, having to then lose a parent and deal with all of this as well.
We are part of history, and we were here for the King's first tour, his first tour as King, and I honestly think that's amazing. Yeah.
The late Queen was also warmly welcomed in Wales, visiting more than 300 times. But she forged a particularly close connection with the people of Aberfan following an unspeakable disaster in 1966, in which coal slurry crashed down Merthyr Mountain, engulfing the village junior school. 140 people died, including 116 children. The Queen was clearly deeply affected by what she saw there and returned many times.
We looked at her and I thought, she is feeling our pain and sorrow. And you could see it etched on her face. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, she came as a mother, she didn't come as a queen.
Prince Charles has grasped the Welsh dragon firmly by its tail.
3 years later, a new chapter began in Wales's relationship with the royal family in Aberystwyth. A young Charles spent a term at university there in preparation for his investiture as Prince of Wales. He learnt Welsh, but 2 radical nationalists died and a 10-year-old boy lost his leg in a botched bombing campaign. There were rumours Prince Charles was wearing a bulletproof vest underneath his robes. The BBC even prepared an obituary for him. But Charles developed a genuine bond with the Welsh people, well known for his charity work in Wales and for his support of Welsh agriculture. As well as a new king, there's now a new Prince and Princess of Wales. They already know the anthem, and William is patron of the Welsh Rugby Union, although the new princess might want to give the England rugby scarf a miss. At the birthplace of Welsh rugby in Lampeter, the new appointment is the talk of training.
It is quite nice to have that sort of like public figure representing us as a union. It is nice to see him supporting us, you know, in what we do, I think, anyway.
Yeah, he's obviously passionate about Wales as a whole and the sport of rugby and the Welsh rugby team, so it's nice to have that as a sort of figurehead, I suppose.
King Charles received an overwhelmingly warm Welsh welcome today. But outside Cardiff Castle, audible boos as the royal convoy rolled up. Views on the monarchy are clearly divided here. The challenge then for the new king and the prince and princess will be to prove their relevance now to the people of Wales. Rhys Williams, News at 10, Cardiff.
With just a weekend to go now before Monday's state funeral of Queen Elizabeth, preparations have become a round-the-clock matter. Police are facing what they say is their biggest security operation ever. World leaders will be arriving while huge crowds are expected to turn out to watch. Today, the Prince and Princess of Wales met some of the armed forces who will be at the core of the whole spectacle and making sure everything goes like clockwork.
It is not a visit that can have been easy. Just over a week after losing his grandmother, the Prince of Wales came to Purbright Army Training Centre to meet Commonwealth troops taking part in her funeral. With rehearsals taking place behind them, he and the Princess of Wales thanked those who'd flown in from Australia, Canada and New Zealand. He later wished them luck, then smiled and told them the Queen would be looking down. If indeed she is watching, it is details she will get. As people pour into central London to either visit the Queen's coffin or watch her funeral, the Metropolitan Police have launched a carefully rehearsed operation. Tens of thousands of officers have been drafted in to help protect the public and ensure events on Monday run smoothly.
Nothing can compare to the scale and the complexity of our operation. So Monday, with the state funeral of Her Majesty the Queen, will be the single largest policing operation that the Met Police has ever undertaken, and I think is ever likely to undertake.
The funeral procession begins on Monday morning. At exactly 10:44 a.m, the Queen's coffin will leave Westminster Hall. The King and his family will walk behind the state gun carriage to Westminster Abbey, where the state funeral will begin at 11 a.m, an hour-long televised service attended by more than 2,000 people. At 12:15, the royal family will follow the gun carriage back towards Buckingham Palace and on to Wellington Arch. There at 1 p.m, the coffin will be moved to the state hearse and taken by road to Windsor, where it will be driven in procession down the Long Walk to St George's Chapel. The committal service begins at 4 p.m, followed by a private family burial at 7:30 in the King George VI Memorial Chapel.
In order to see the funeral procession, people will line the streets in central London and on the route out to Windsor. Thousands are expected here on the Mall, and to ensure they get to pay their last respects, some have started arriving already.
And my woolly hat for when it gets cold, my scarf.
Gwenda has just arrived from Swansea. We met her as she was putting up her tent.
Why is it so important for you to be here and to ensure you see it?
Because she's a very special person who's done so much for not just the United Kingdom but the world, and we're here to celebrate the life of a wonderful woman.
Within 5 minutes of the Queen dying, I had my ticket bought.
400 metres up the Mall, Canadian Bernadette was sitting in the same spot she was in for the Jubilee.
I know it doesn't make a lot of sense, but I had to do it.
By Monday, neither will be alone in honouring the Queen, and it'll be down to the police to make sure they and thousands of others can do it safely. Emily Morgan, News at 10.
Now, the security operation for Monday's funeral has been described as like 100 state visits in a single day. Our global security editor, Rohit Kachru, is here. Rohit, I suppose this moment has been prepared for years, but the reality of the day is something completely different.
Yeah, and we were in Westminster earlier this evening, and there are police everywhere, and they're enacting a plan now that's been around for decades, actually. It's been finessed, it's been changed every year as new technology becomes available, as events change. But this is not only the oldest plan in British policing, it's also, we learned today, the biggest plan too, even bigger, perhaps surprisingly, than the plan for the 2012 Olympics. It's being led by Scotland Yard, but it involves every police force in the country, countless Whitehall departments, all of the royal palaces too. But there's plenty that's still up in the air, and that's because, plans aren't really finalised until the embassies around London can confirm who they're sending to this event, because different people, with different seniority, they have different protocols, different security procedures around them. And so, as we saw from Carl Dinan's report earlier, there's no clarity on who China will be sending. We hear today from the Saudis that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman might attend the funeral. He might not attend the funeral. He's certainly coming to London, but they don't know whether he's going to Westminster Abbey. So there's still a lot that is not yet known. And until that is finalised, we don't know, frankly, precisely what is going to happen. But Westminster Abbey will welcome the world on Monday, and inevitably it will be a huge strain on the resources of the police and the intelligence agencies as well.
Thank you very much indeed, Rohit. Now to other news now, and a long and awful task is underway in a forest in northeastern Ukraine of exhuming hundreds of bodies at a mass burial site. Local police say 445 graves were discovered among the trees near the city of Izhum after the area was recaptured from Russian forces. Ukrainian officials say many of the remains buried in shallow graves are believed to be those of civilians. Some had been shot. President Zelensky said there was evidence some had been tortured.
As Ukrainian troops consolidate their hold over freshly liberated land, and as the physical destruction around Izhum becomes clearer, so a new and chilling discovery has been made in the pine forests nearby. These are graves that hold the bodies of hundreds of Ukrainians who appear to have been killed during the 5 months in which Russia occupied the town. Soldiers are now exhuming some of the bodies, looking for evidence of war crimes and of torture. This will be a long and painstaking forensic process. President Zelensky, who himself toured the town this week, said there were clear signs of an atrocity. Today the world must see what the Russian army left behind, he declared. Locals have a similar story. This Kharkiv resident spoke of his bafflement that Russians could do this. They looked like brothers, he says, but they did this, adding that Putin and Zelensky must sort it out. But the Russian leader at a summit in Uzbekistan said that Moscow might only escalate, describing recent attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure as warning strikes. But his isolation became clearer. The Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, appearing to rebuke Putin by declaring, "Today's era is not of war." Even at the UN next week, as world leaders gather in New York, there is little hope for a ceasefire or for negotiations.
We will be having meetings with the Ukrainians. There are no plans at this time to have meetings with the Russians. They have not indicated that they have an interest in diplomacy. What they're interested in is continuing to raise this unprovoked war on Ukraine, and the Ukrainians are working diligently to defend themselves.
It leaves the region devastated, and the Ukrainians trying to clear the debris of war before the harsh winter approaches. Robert Moore, News at 10.
2 police officers are in hospital tonight after being stabbed in central London this morning. The attack happened at 6 a.m. in Leicester Square when they stopped a man on suspicion of carrying a knife. The man then stabbed a female officer in the arm, causing potentially life-changing injuries. Her male colleague was stabbed in the neck and chest. Both officers are stable. Police say a man is under arrest. Premier League football resumed tonight for the first time since the Queen's death was announced, with players and fans alike paying their tribute. This was Villa Park tonight, home of Prince William's favourite football club, Aston Villa, who were playing Southampton. A minute's silence before kick-off. Then, at 70 minutes into the game, this. And finally, it was a former England football captain who today gave us an eloquent answer to anyone who might be wondering why all those people are prepared to queue for all those hours to pay their respects to the late Queen. David Beckham, spurning any VIP privileges, joined the line like everyone else, waiting 13 hours.
From all walks of life, they come to queue for their Queen. Among what's affectionately been called the Elizabeth line, David Beckham. David, what does it mean to you to be here today?
Well, I grew up in a house, and if my parents would have been here today, I know that they would have wanted to be here. So I'm here on their behalf. Everyone is feeling it, and our thoughts are with the family, and obviously with everybody here today, because it's special to be here to celebrate and to hear the different stories, what people have to say. The most special moment for me was when I received my OBE, and I step up, and obviously I had my wife there as well, to step up to get my honour, but then also Her Majesty to ask a question and to talk. And you know, I was so lucky that I was able to have a few moments like that in my life, you know, to be around Her Majesty, because we can all see with the love that has been shown how special she is and how special she was.
An unexpected famous face among the thousands here. So what time did he join the queue?
I thought by coming at 2 a.m. it was going to be a little bit quieter. I was wrong. Everybody had that in mind, but the people here, you know, all ages. You know, there was like I said, an 84-year-old lady walking around. There was a 90-year-old gentleman walking around. Everybody wants to be here to be part of this experience and celebrate what Her Majesty has done for us. Every time that we stood there and we wore those three-line shirts and I had my armband and we sang, you know, God Save Our Queen, that was something that meant so much to us.
Then the moment came to pay his respects. Amid this immense wave of gratitude and love for Queen Elizabeth, one of football's greatest stars, just one of the crowd. Neil Connery, News at 10.
So another powerfully emotional day in Queen Elizabeth II's solemn final journey comes to a close, and tonight we saw her 4 children take their place to stand vigil around her coffin, a guard of royal honour and of deep family love in the sacred hush of Westminster Hall. Tomorrow it will be the turn of the Queen's grandchildren to mount their own guard of honour, including the brothers Prince William and Prince Harry, with the Duke of Sussex allowed to wear military uniform. And tonight the public continues to wend its way past the coffin inside the hall, each person silent, each person respectful and thankful for all that the late Queen did for her nation. Whilst outside in the autumn chill, the miles-long queues of mourners patiently waits forward and waits more, as it will do until tonight. Good night.
Good evening to you. More